الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا فمن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله ثم أما بعد السلام عليكم. It is a great honor and a great privilege, as always, to meet with this group. You know, this has, mashallah, over the last 5 or so years, been a consistent, in my life and in my teaching. I'm really, really thankful for that. And I really appreciate being able to meet, in spite of our social distance through the virtual space. Mashallah, this is a card. Okay, I do have the card that was sent to my family, and we were requested by Amina Qureshi to open the card all together, inshallah. So I'm opening the card now. And I'm going to read what is written. It says, Dear Ubayd, Eid Mubarak from your Monday night class. Jazakallahu khairan for providing us with so much knowledge, even during these quarantine times. We want to pay it forward and honor all that you've done for us by gifting you with the blessings of sponsoring an orphan. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, your class donated enough to sponsor 4 orphans.
Wow, mashallah.
Mashallah. And they mentioned, Jazakallahu anna kulla khairin wa barik fikum fima razaqakum وتقبل أعمالكم وجعلها صدقة جارية في ميزان حسناتكم. And then they wrote, may Allah reward you on behalf of us with good and bless you in what He has provided for you and accept from you your good deeds and make those good deeds revolving صدقة جارية in the scale of your good deeds. في ميزان حسناتكم. ما شاء الله.
MashaAllah. What is it?
MashaAllah.
And this is
Zakala. The Zakala cake.
oh, mashallah. What? This is, oh, mashallah. Wow. This is really special, man. Oh, my goodness. La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. I have to read this.
What is it?
These are some messages from my favorite class. I know my glasses have the glare. I normally don't wear them, but it makes it easier for me to read if I'm wearing my glasses. Amina said, thank you so much for being such a great resource and inspiration. May Allah bless you and bless your family. And Sister Isra Omar, she said, Eid Mubarak. May you and your family have a blessed Eid. And Amal Iman, she said, Eid Mubarak, Brother Ubaydullah. Thank you for your commitment to our ummah and especially our local community. Not always easy, but alhamdulillah, Allah rewards those who persevere for His sake. May Allah shower you and your family with blessings for the coming year. Okay, I'll just read a few of them. Okay. And Sharif Ali said, Eid Mubarak to you and your family. Assalamu alaikum, Ustaz Ubaydullah. Eid Mubarak. I hope you and your family enjoy a blessed Eid. Thank you for your presence and being a light in our community. You have made such a tremendous impact on our lives and by extension, our relationship with Allah. Subhanallah. I'm so grateful for our class and the community we built. I'm keeping you and your family in my du'as. May Allah preserve, protect you, and increase you in knowledge. Jazakallah khair for all that you do. MashaAllah.
And Jazakallah to you.
Alhamdulillah. And Najasi said Jazakallah khair to everybody. And
I said to you.
Oh. I'm sure he means to everyone else, MashaAllah. So, Bismillah. Okay. That was very, very special, MashaAllah. It was very special. Look, the key to close the door, man. Bismillah, that was such a pleasant surprise, mashallah. I really treasure the community that we've been able to build, in this class. And I look forward to being able to meet in person, but I just don't know how far off that might be. Today, my heart is a little bit heavy. It's my heart. Things have been lightened considerably since opening that beautiful card and learning that our family is sponsoring 4 orphans because of the gift that the class has given us. But with all of the, first the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent, protests and some of the rioting and, some of the unrest, it's been, very difficult because it struck very close to home. I live on 48th Street and 47th Street, which of course is just one block north of me, experienced a lot of, destruction. Places were burned, places were forcibly entered. If you drive down the street now, you see lots of board ups. You see lots of shards of glass from shattered windows. And, it's all been very, very heavy, for me. So I was planning to use this space selfishly for myself as, a space to just reckon, with all of this and to think aloud about, some of this and to discuss some of what we are experiencing and what we're seeing. So I want to just turn the floor over to anyone else to see if anybody had, an observation, a point, a question, or any ideas that they would like to share, with our group this afternoon. Bismillah. And you can just unmute yourself and just ask the question, or make the comment, or you can just write something in. Okay, Bismillah. Okay, Bismillah. I hear somebody. Bismillah. Well, don't all speak at once.
Assalamu alaikum, Ubaydullah. How are you doing?
Salam. Alhamdulillah, I'm well, man. That was a beautiful dedication and gift from the class. And I'm really happy that my children experienced that, this gift of giving that someone actually sponsored, 4 orphans, on behalf of my family. And I'm elated about that. And I'm hoping that my children really took heed of what was done. And, so I'm happy about that, but everything else does have me a little off balance. But Bismillah, the floor is yours.
It's hard. So my question is, when I think about things that I want to do or things that I want to contribute to help, you start thinking about, oh, maybe you can put, this forward, maybe you can try to do this, maybe you can try to get that done, with different causes, different people that are doing things, maybe you can invest in this, maybe you can invest in that, or maybe you can start something on your own. And then you just start, you start getting confused of what, you want to put your efforts into, or what is best to put your efforts into. And there's so many good causes out there. I just want to know, what do you think is the best way that one can help and put their energy and focus into that cause, or put their energy and focus into this area?
Yeah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think, what we're witnessing is kind of a collective moment of reckoning, for the United States of America. And I think even more than what we experienced in 1992 with the LA, I don't even like to call them riots, but that social upheaval, it was restricted to LA. And then more recently, what we saw in Baltimore, it was restricted to Baltimore. But something about the killing of George Floyd has really struck a chord, not only with people in the US, but people all over the world. I think the fact that it was captured on video, the manner in which it occurred was just very gruesome. Something that, mashallah, my wife and her great sensitivity hasn't even been able to watch. I watched the entire video, but I'm not sure, I don't regret watching the entire video. And I think that people are rightfully pointing out that that video is indicative of a kind of circumscription, meaning a kind of that, a lot of, Black people in America feel that their lives are circumscribed by racism, and that they're regularly exposed to premature death as a result, of racism. And I think, if we want to do more than put a Band-Aid on the corpse or just patch the leak, we have to think about ways that we can contribute to an overall sustainable change, in the way we regard Black life. I think in the U.S. and Black life exists in many places and in many contexts throughout the U.S. But a lot of that Black life does tend to be concentrated, in urban America, in America's larger, cities. So thinking as Muslims, as a Muslim community, about ways that we can contribute to more equity, more justice, more enhancement of the circumstance of folks that live in those communities is where I think our attention needs to be. Right now there's a lot of frustration and there's a lot of anger, and I'm not one to criticize very quickly that frustration. I'm not one to denounce that anger. I'm not one to talk about Target department stores when we should be talking about people that live their lives as targets, right? I'm not one to talk about the criminal destruction of property when we need to be talking about the destruction of human life. However, I do understand that anger and frustration, these are in no way substitutes for a real plan of restoration, of rebuilding. And so I think Muslims who are, in community with, folks, in the inner city, with, African-American communities, we have to, direct our energies toward, being solution-based, being solution-oriented. We are a people that, we recognize that, an expression of pain, an expression of frustration might be a necessary component to healing. It's necessary and it shouldn't be denounced. However, we know that healing doesn't stop with, destroying businesses or just protesting or rallying. These are necessary components, but I think that our expertise as a community is being engaged at the next step of the process. Okay, right now, frustration is being allowed to express itself, suffering is being allowed to speak, and I don't think that should be denounced. But what's next? And I think that our community should lead the way in terms of reimagining how we can all exist together, as a community. I think one of the things that we take for granted is that, the Muslim community is one of the most heterogeneous communities, in the United States of America, and I'm talking communities that people are voluntarily a part of. Yes, and people work in diverse environments and people go to school in diverse environments, but you do have Muslim communities, and it's not great. Our communities are entirely too segregated in terms of race, and socioeconomic status, but we have more diversity and more heterogeneity than many communities. So I think that we can actually demonstrate what equitably sharing space, equitably being in community with each other, honesty and coming to terms with our past and history with race and class, and geographic place of residence, what those things look like in community. And it's not to say that we should all rush out and individually empty our bank accounts and give them to folks in the inner city. I don't think that there's a reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't offer this as the solution to all problems. Rather, the institution of zakat suggests that we all incrementally have to make some contribution toward eradicating things we know to be social ills. So I think thinking about how we confront, some of this inequality and starting with ourselves, I think this is a good place to start. I don't, in terms of pinpointing specific efforts, I think it's best to kind of do your own on the ground assessment, going into communities and talking with folks and looking at your own expertise and looking at your own interests. Once a person was asking Dr. Omar, who's a teacher of mine, mashallah, I'm very lucky, I'm very fortunate, very blessed to have him as a teacher. They were asking him a similar question, not specifically in the context of what's happening now, but a similar question about, what can we do? How can we do? And his response simply was, well, what do you like to do? I think, there's so much help that folks need that you can choose, your theater of engagement. You can choose whether you want to directly contribute funds or whether you want to offer some other kind of human capital, or whether you want to just be an organizer, helping people to get in rooms where they can have conversations that help to build camaraderie and fraternity and sorority, or there's a number of things that we need to do. But I would like to see the Muslim community take the proactive lead. Take the proactive lead. This is a great opportunity for us to distinguish ourselves as people with answers. Everyone is frustrated. Everyone is angry. Some people are allowing their frustration and their anger to drive them to very violent expressions of those. And there's a place for that. But who are the people that we will be turning to for solutions, right? It's almost like, simple analogy, and forgive me for its simplicity. I wish that I was thinking of a more sophisticated analogy. I might recognize that the foundation of a home is crumbling. And I might decide that the entire home needs to be knocked down, right? I might decide that we need to tear this home down to its foundations and rebuild it. In terms of doing the demo, in terms of doing the demolition, I'm gonna need people with some skill, but I've seen construction projects, a lot of demolition is on the job training. If I give you a heavy enough sledgehammer and I tell you, hit here, here, and here, you don't need to be a specialist of any kind to engage that demolition project. You can knock that house down. In the process of rebuilding that house, then I'm going to need people of specialization and expertise. I'm going to need stonemasons. I'm going to need a general contractor. I'm going to need people that specialize in electrical wiring and drywall and flooring and painting and and on and on and on. So right now, I think to still, this is such a simple analogy, and I know it's a bit unnuanced, but there's lots of people right now that are engaged in the demo phase of, they recognize that something needs to change, and perhaps something needs to be torn down so something can change within the dominant culture. But who will those same people turn to show them how to rebuild? What does a beloved community look like? What does it look like to live productively in full view and respect of what we owe to one another. This is where the Muslims need to take the lead. This is our moment to show people what we really have in this beautiful faith that we profess. And I would like to see us contribute to efforts to deepen and then to display that kind of tradition among ourselves. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, mashallah, that was very good. That's perfect. I think the best point was search your own interest, and focus in that area, and then, taking the lead and setting the example, mashallah.
Yeah, we have to take the lead. We have to set the example. We have to, we have to be, those constructive, builders. This is very intense anger. I mean, I was out yesterday and I saw, what was taking place. I got close enough to it. I didn't want to, my family was concerned about me, but I wanted to try my best to feel what people were feeling. Because, if I'm being 100% honest, some of this is very difficult to watch because, for better or worse, and I've tried to strike something of a critical, chord, always within my work. But for better or for worse, I am very invested. I'm raising my family here. I own a home here. I'm a taxpayer here. So I'm personally very invested, in the success and prosperity, of the area. And so trying to identify with people who don't feel that same level of investment, people that, maybe as they, break the window of a retail location, enter, don't feel that, the value and the beauty and the prosperity of their area is being impacted because they don't recognize it as their area. I wanted to, even though they live in the area, I got very close, and I can say with some degree of surety, it's very intense, the sentiment and the feeling of hopelessness and desperation and anger and frustration. It's palpable if you get close to it, and I got very close to it. But I do recognize that this will pass. The frustration, this expression of the frustration, the anger, the rage, and this is, and after it passes, this is where I would like to see the Muslim community enter to show, what's next, right? What's next? Is there some countervailing narrative, right? We know that all of us have interpreted, have inherited rather, a kind of racist history that is a part of America's inheritance in terms of being able to imagine what's next, being able to imagine what life looks like without that. I think this is where we have a chance to really, really distinguish ourselves as people with a vision. And we're in a unique position to do that. So, may Allah give us tawfiq, may Allah give us tawfiq. Other ideas, questions, pushbacks even. If somebody wants to push back, I'm just interested in what the space is thinking.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Bismillah. I hear what you're saying, and I think when you say that we know that we're inheriting a racist country, I think a lot of people in our community don't know. They don't have a sense of the depth of pain and the sense of the depth of hurt.
Yeah.
And
yeah. No, that's definitely a part of it. I don't know what did you finish? Cause your voice.
it's like getting too emotional. Not too emotional because I feel like I'm on survival mode right now.
May Allah aid you and assist you and elevate you, inshallah.
Inshallah. So I feel I think some people are starting to do this, is try to hold space for people to first in our community. We need to hear each other, or people need to hear this experience and really really truly understand it and confront some of the biases that are in our own community before I think that has to be a first step. That's just my sense of what one solution that we can start to do is hold space for.
No, I agree with you. I think Sister Amal, it turns out to be very, very difficult, because I think in our earnestness as a community and in our mutual goodwill, it's sometimes hard to recognize, or hard to admit rather, that we're talking about something bigger than our individual actions. That I think sometimes that can be very depressing if you allow yourself to feel that we're not talking about every single solitary person being a racist. We're not talking about the individual actions or conduct of one sister or one brother. And many times, there's a kind of fragility that when you talk about deeply ingrained racist patterns that we participate in, that we're complicit in, that some of us actively maintain, perhaps unwittingly, you have a feeling that like this is a personal indictment. Are you saying I'm, and many of us don't identify with those labels, we don't identify with those tags. And that back and forth, one person, usually the person that has been the victim of the racism, of the oppression, of the profiling or what have you, is, airing their grievances, talking very openly and very candidly about what they experience. And instead of being able to just hold that space, we have people that immediately become defensive. Oh, I'm not really, no, that's not true. And, I've never said that word. I've never said, Abid. I've never said Abd. I've never referred to people in that way. My Muhammad Ali is my hero. I identify, and I think that people forget that all of that can be true about, who we, individually are. But when we're attempting to address systems of normalized, oppression, those things can still be alive and well in spite of our personal, commitments to, equity and justice. And I think we just need to be able to have that conversation in a brotherly and sisterly way, so that nobody feels that they're being personally indicted. Rather, we feel collectively that we're just trying to get to the kernel of the problem. We're just trying to get to the crux of the matter. We're just trying to get to, what needs to be changed, what needs to be altered, what needs to be transformed. And we're not talking about, everybody being racist or everybody being anti-Black. And I think that once we acquire the ability to have the conversation in an open, no holds barred way, we'll begin seeing some progress with regard to how we deal with these issues in our community. And Allah knows best.
Hey, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
This is Khalil. Kind of going off what the sister was saying. We're hearing a lot of words like allies, right? And Muslims are being allies. But how do you not overstep the boundary? Because let's be frank, you can't just give solutions, right? Especially coming from, if you don't understand the context, it's kind of not looked upon, you know what I mean, in a manner, because not everybody understands like growing up in Chicago, you kind of understand the context of the complicated relationships with police officers and with relationships and everything. But not everybody, I think, in our community kind of understands that. So just based off, being an ally or being able to help, just based off you saying, you got to have, it's time for us to give solutions, it's time for us to give solutions within your own expertise. How do you engage with that? Especially when I think of solutions, I think of sometimes when people from outside come in and try to give solutions. If you don't understand the context, if you haven't been through certain things, your solutions aren't going to necessarily be the right solutions. You know what I mean? Like, if I have kind of like how when they talk about equity within schools, for example, sometimes they have certain teachers who come from a certain background within that certain school because they understand the context. That's why it's better for teaching certain kids in that manner, right? So I guess that's my question, just coming off how you're supposed to help and as far as being an ally. Yeah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. A very beautiful question by my brother Khalil. And what I would say to that, personally, I worry. I think when positive action is taken, we can expect the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The concept of barakah, the concept of blessing, it's a very strange concept. It's this idea that as one is doing something, God places in one's effort a special kind of effectiveness. God places in the tools of the task, a special kind of utility, right? But you have to do something. One of our teachers, Sheikh Amin Khalwadia, who from Darul Qasim, he used to say openly, Allah cannot bless nothing. You have to actually do something. You have to have something so that if you're out there working, for instance, and say you're earning a very meager salary, God can put blessing into what you're earning. But you have to move. You must act for God to put blessing into what you have. God does not put blessing into nothing. And so with that, I'm very concerned about a kind of paralysis that can come from over-analysis. That if we're just analyzing and thinking and analyzing and thinking and analyzing and thinking, if we overanalyze, then we can paralyze. Like, oh, we just can't do anything. And these are problems that are very big. If you're talking about, the relationship between Black communities and law enforcement, and assumptions of criminality, assumptions of aggression, assumptions of, increased thresholds of pain and things like this. These are deep issues. These are big problems. And I think it might be a little bit naive to assume that as Muslims, we can just show up and, solve all of these problems in one fell swoop. However, I think within our own micro community that is made up of a significant population of African Americans, right? Within our own micro community, we can start providing examples through, or providing solutions through our lived example. And then inviting people to have a look at that and choosing to, and it's also a da'wah, choosing to, model or to, mimic what we've done in as much as we actually do something. So, my thing is, to think that we can solve the problems of an entity as multifarious and as abundant as America or Black and white America. No, I think that might be a little bit of wishful thinking. There might be some tamanniyat, very, very extended hopes. But to think that within our local community, we might be able to provide some models of how people from different backgrounds, ethnically, socioeconomically, the parts of town they live in, can actually be in community with each other in a deeply respectful way. I actually think that we can do that, Khalil. I think that our local community is a small enough controlled group that we can begin implementing, some initiatives some programs even that we can honestly say that, you know what, the larger issue of, say, race in America and policing and things of that nature, and white supremacy and anti-Black racism, we have some ideas about that. But with regard to much of that, we're also just thinking aloud, like other people are thinking aloud. But in terms of how we have attempted to confront these, inequities, inequalities, issues in our own community, this is some of what we've attempted to do. And what I was saying is that our community, I think, has a very unique opportunity to provide a viable, alternative, because we actually do have a community that is somewhat ethnically diverse. It's not, it's not in any way representative of the entire United States, but it is somewhat ethnically diverse. It's more diverse than maybe any other religious community. One social commentator said that even now, when, post, desegregation, the most segregated 2 hours of American public life are on Sunday between 9 and 11, because most Black Christians go to Black churches and most white Christians go to white churches. So even among religious communities, ours is very unique in that, and I don't want to over-congratulate or self-congratulate too much. We have lots of work to do in terms of how we appreciate and manage our differences. But I think we have more of an opportunity to provide a viable alternative than many other religious communities. So what I would suggest is just, our sphere of concern is the entire world. It must be. We're the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and Allah says concerning him, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We sent you as a mercy to everything that exists. Part of that verse, to be a Muslim is to have a concern about everything that exists, not even just people, also animals, also the environment, right? Even the Prophet ﷺ treated what we would refer to as inanimate objects with a great deal of respect and consideration, often naming those objects and expressing openly his gratitude to those things that he made use of. We're concerned about everything. What we can actually influence, on the other hand, Khalil, I think it's ambitious just to attempt to influence our immediate community. But I think we should start there. Does that help?
Yeah, no, that does help. I agree with you in the sense that it's definitely an opportunity that we have that needs to be taken seriously, But yeah, I do appreciate that answer, though.
I mean, no, Jazakallah khair. Other things? Alaikum salam.
Just a quick question, or actually, it's not a quick question, but something I've been struggling with over this past week.
Is this Omar?
Yes.
Habib, I'm so sorry. I need to talk to you.
No, don't worry about it.
Okay, we'll call me right after class and we'll figure something out.
Inshallah.
If I have to make a call right now, I can.
You're fine.
Okay.
Jazakallah khair. The question I'd like to ask, we live in South Loop, and our building was vandalized. The surrounding area was vandalized. And, when I went to work, I'm working at nights right now, working with my other co-trainees who are not Black, right? And so we're trying to, collectively, everyone's talking about this. And when I was reading an excerpt from Dr. Martin Luther King about his frustration with the moderate white, not the extremist, KKK way, but his point that he specifically referred to was the moderate white who is more devoted to order than justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with you in your methods of direct action, who paternalistically feels that he can set a timetable for another man's freedom, who lives the myth of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season. And so this really spoke out to me because, like you were mentioning earlier, like the
Point.
distraction in the sense of everyone is now talking about the riots. Everyone is talking about the destruction of property. You can be upset that your car got flipped over, but that visceral response, even myself, I mean, I saw, a neighbor's car flipped over in front of our building, and, the visceral response is, oh, like, how could someone do that? But where's the visceral response when we're saying about why that was done, or, the anger?
Yeah, that's it shows how unethical and immoral our priorities are. Yes, I agree with you. I mean, I'm alhamdulillah, man, this is where, we have the guidance of the Sharia. We have the guidance of the Quran. We have the guidance of the Sunnah. So that when we talk about our kind of like the fundamental framework of, morality, we base it on 5, fundamental principles. And the first of them is hifd ad-din, the preservation of the deen itself, right? The preservation of the faith. Like that is, for us, the most important value, believe it or not, is the preservation of faith. The second most important value is the preservation of life, right? And then after that, the preservation of lineage. Then after that, the preservation of the intellect, right? So that we don't admit the recreational use of intoxicants and things of that nature. Then the last of them is the preservation of property, hifdul mal, right? The preservation of personal property. And we have people that will, the preservation of personal property is huge. How can someone destroy a building or a car? But the preservation of life itself is something that they can somehow be well adjusted to, watching certain people's quality, of life be impacted by something as disgusting as racism. So yes, you're absolutely right about that. You're absolutely right about that.
So actually, a follow-up question is that in the Muslim community, even we've been discussing this idea that, in Islam, we don't promote anarchy. We prefer justice and order, even in the sense of some level of oppression. That's a very hard concept. I mean, for me, like, when we're talking amongst friends, it's almost like, do we just take a back seat and let this frustration we don't need to have an opinion right now. We don't need to say anything right now, focus on the bigger issue. But there's this kind of, if you look at kind of what people are talking about there, everyone's saying, this is wrong, like, riots aren't productive, looting's not productive, so on and so forth. And it's a tough reconciliation, because on one hand, we're talking about how we should be wary of like social unrest, but on the other hand, that's kind of like what Dr. Malcolm's critiquing. Like he's saying this, I agree with you in your frustration, but I don't agree with you with your means, is like almost quoted out of that. But that's kind of what, our community is.
Yeah, no, for me, it's very, very difficult. I think that I am always appreciative of questions that cannot be answered easily. When you ask questions that cannot be answered easily, it's a sign that you're asking the right questions. When you approach those tensions, when you approach those points of kind of mutually exclusive tension, it means that you're actually getting to the core of what's real within the human experience. So I think that, yes, looking at this in a strictly, in a strict kind of the sense of like prioritization, then of course we would prioritize life over property. But when someone looks at this strategically, when someone looks and says, what is the aim? What is the goal? Someone says, look, I know, and this is even a position that I'm wrestling with the same thing. I mean, that's what I kind of started with, is that as I went out and witnessed some of the civil unrest, I did think about, some of the fruits of my own labors. I did think about that. And I did think, there's no way that someone finds any kind of long-term sustainability, in destroying property. that someone finds that someone believes that destroying property is really a solution to the problem, at hand. And for someone to request more, to request that this energy, right, the spontaneous release of frustration be harnessed, be channeled toward more sustainable transformation, development, conversation, explorations of justice, of equity. I don't think that that's, I don't think that that is necessarily kind of the sellout moderate position that it is characterized as being sometimes. I think, one of the things I've been struggling with, if I'm to be completely honest, is what are we doing all of this praying for? Why are we doing all of this fasting? Why are we reading scripture? What is the, if the point is to see popular frustration, and the only thing we have to offer is to reflect that frustration back to itself, then what does it mean to have a relationship with God that maybe offers you a different perspective? What does it mean to be in touch with, technologies of the self, prayer, fasting, meditation, reflection, reading scripture, dhikr, making, remembrance? What does it mean to be in touch with those things? And are those things supposed to imbue your perspective with something that a person that isn't doing those things, but is very angry about injustice, maybe doesn't have? Do you understand what I'm saying, Omar?
Yes, just
What is it, what does that mean that, maybe someone, and it's not, and I don't think that to set them up as counterbalances, in conversation, either you totally agree with vandalism or you're putting property above life. I don't think that it's that simple. I would say, like, for my own clarity, on the issue, we're definitely not elevating property, over life. We're definitely not talking about target when we should be talking about people who live as targets. One commentator gave that bit of kind of poetic flavoring to what's taking place. We definitely shouldn't be talking about broken glass when we're literally talking about broken necks. We shouldn't be talking, I understand that. I don't think any of us would say that broken glass should be prioritized over broken necks, or, dismembered, structures over dismembered lives and corpses, etc. However, for one to ask if this is in fact the best way to promote our aims, objectives, goals, I think, you have to ask that question. And since we were referencing, Dr. King, his position in terms of civil disobedience, and, nonviolence, and that Gandhian tradition, he was very, very committed to that tradition. And he did not think that any other tradition would be as effective as that tradition. So my point, and we can debate that, we can debate that. But my point is that even the man himself would look critically at strategies of resistance. Just because something is a strategy of resistance, or because something is an expression of resistance, does not mean that I have to deem it an effective one, or an efficacious one. I can totally acknowledge that this is a strategy of resistance, and that resistance is commendable. Whether or not this is the most effective strategy, I question that. And I think one is entitled to do that. I don't know, what are your thoughts?
I mean, from one perspective is, do we need to have an opinion? Like, do we need to have a vocal opinion always on whether we condone something or not? I mean, or do we say, like, look, let's take a step back and realize this is coming from a place of great pain and great anger, and the car can be replaced. The glasses, the glass in the stores can be replaced. Let's be very careful of how we phrase this. And I think it's just, it's tough. I mean, I don't want to say that this doesn't affect people until it does, but maybe the violence finally makes people wake up and say, like, look, like now it's affecting me. My car, window got broken, the 7-Eleven got broken into. I don't feel safe every night. But questioning, why is that unrest there? But I don't know, as Muslims, like, do we need to always have that kind of opinion, say, oh, like we have to condone this violence immediately as soon as it happens? Or do we have to say, like, look, there's a lot of stuff going around, there's a lot of, fogginess out there. Let's focus on the issue at hand and let people who are more rooted in that community take charge rather than.
I think a lot of this is a good place for kind of probing our own hearts, right? And إنما الأعمال بالنيات, actions are but by intentions. استفتي قلبك ولو أفتوك الناس, consult your own heart even if people are telling you what to do, right? These are both ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. If one looks and they realize that their condemnation of the violence and the civil unrest is really about protecting their assets. That's what this is. If you look and you say, this is really about, my building, where I pay rent or where I own a condo. It's really about my car. That's what this is really, what's really motivating me is I don't want to see this instability touch me. Then I would say, it would be prophetic to push past that, to try to see the impact to usually your financial interests as being less important than the impact to people's lives. If, on the other hand, one is looking and one is saying, thinking about the lives of the people most impacted, by the racism, I'm not sure that this will deliver anything. But as you mentioned, perhaps this is a good place for me to hold my tongue, and just, hold space and just to give, pain, to give frustration, the space that it needs to express itself. I think that would be a respectable position. On the other hand, though, and this might be something that is easier for me to do than you, I don't assume that to be the only alternative, the only choice for somebody in that's experiencing, oppression. I don't ID with that. I don't ID with that. I don't identify with that. And if I say to the people engaged in the action, you come from a fine tradition of people who dealt with oppression and subjugation and racism and white supremacy at a level of intensity that exceeds even the level that you're dealing with those things right now. And they never resorted to this. Those are the shoulders of the people that you stand on. And I'm holding you accountable for more. I'm holding you accountable for deeper thinking. I'm holding you accountable for more vision, for more foresight. I'm holding you accountable for offering long-term solutions. I'm holding you accountable for offering sustainable solutions. I'm holding you accountable, for opening dialogue. I still feel comfortable doing that because I believe in not only the frustration of my people, but I believe in the frustration of the people. But I also believe in, because this is not just African Americans doing this. Wallahi. In fact, some of the protests that I've seen, African Americans are in the extreme minority.
Of course.
So I do believe that you're capable of more And I think to say that to somebody does not mean that you're discrediting their frustration. You're just telling them straight up on the real, like, look, we have to retain the ability to speak truth to power. And that's the first part of the equation, talking about police misconduct, talking about how policing is done in inner cities, talking about, you know, the wholesale disregard for Black life. But at the same time, we're also speaking truth to pain. That I know that you're in pain, but I'm holding you accountable for offering more to the solution than breaking a window, offering more to the solution than setting a car on fire. I believe because I believe that you have more to offer than that. You understand what I'm saying?
No, Jazakallah khair. That's very, very helpful.
Yeah, and so you know, just to kind of, I guess, clarify, if I'm motivated by, you know, my own kind of very narrow commercial interests, then yeah, that's weak. It's like, oh, what about my job? What about my car? What about my property? What about my store? And that's weak. If I'm motivated, you know, otherwise by, you know, a belief that, I expect more. You know, I do expect more, and maybe what I'm expecting is nothing short of saintly. Maybe to expect more is to expect a lot. Well, it's hard for me when I'm speaking, you know, to a community that has given me that more. We've seen that. I mean, yes, there's been periods of rioting, you know, in urban America, but there's been much more forbearance. There's been much more grace. There's been much more patience. There's been much more prayer. There's been much more consistent dedication, much more development, much more work. There's been much more of those things than civil unrest, but maybe we're asking for too much. Wallahu ta'ala alam.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So I have nothing unique or anything to contribute, more just reflections, I guess. But
Bismillah.
I feel like the Black community has been incredibly generous with the rest of us. Even like the comments that you're making now about like looking into the community of people that are protesting the systemic violence and oppression, and being like, we're gonna hold you accountable. Like, I think before we can even talk about holding anybody else accountable, like we need to hold ourselves accountable. Like, I'm fundamentally embarrassed that the store owner that called the police on George Floyd was a Palestinian Muslim man. Like, I, as a Palestinian Muslim woman, like unfortunately, I'm not surprised. Like, anti-Black racism is not new to the Palestinian community, nor to the Arab community, nor to all sorts of non-Black people. But I'm so fundamentally disappointed. And I think it's like questions like, you know, what is our position? And that's like feeding our ego at this point. Like, we need to talk about like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? How is something happening? Like, I mean, we're talking like in Islam, you're saying if a thief steals something out of necessity, like they're not punished in any capacity. Like, and then we're gonna call the police on a man for allegedly using a $20 bill, counterfeit $20 bill, knowing that very well his life might be at stake. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. It feels like our priorities and even like what is cited from the Deen is totally upside down right now. I appreciated the hierarchy of things that you outlined, or it's like preservation of Deen, then human life and lineage, etc. Because I think that puts things into perspective. But I'm so embarrassed, so disappointed.
Yeah, no, and wallahi, it's embarrassing. I actually wrote a little small 1,500 word piece about Mahmoud Abu Mayalla, and calling the police over what was a really, really minor infraction and might not have even been done intentionally. I mean, I don't use cash often. I mostly use credit or debit. But if somebody passes me a counterfeit bill, I don't analyze it and I pass it on. Even the assumption of criminal intent in that, there's something there. Like, why would you, somebody gives me a counterfeit bill, even assuming that this is definitely intentional graft. This is the person is grifting. Why would you assume that? And this business has been in South Minneapolis for 31 years, right? 31 years. And that you would assume upon receiving a counterfeit bill that this is an intentional, this is a criminal act. It's very, very disappointing. And I think it speaks to, this is what I try to write about in my piece. It speaks to a culture of alienation that many people who operate businesses, in, economically depressed Black communities, inner city, urban areas, that they really have a certain disdain, for their clients and the lives of their clients. And that's a shame, because, the only place that this is addressed in the Quran is in Surah Al-Ma'idah, in the 75th ayah. Allah talks about some members of the Jewish community and how you have some of them, and look at the comprehensiveness of the ayah. Some of them, Allah mentions if you gave them a whole kintar, a whole heap of gold, they would pay it back to you with no problem. And then you have those that if you gave them a single coin, they wouldn't pay it back unless, you consistently demand it from them. And this is because they say, "Laysa fil ummiyina alayna sabil." "Laysa alayna fil ummiyina sabil" is like, we're not held accountable for exploiting these ignorant people. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this is a lie. This is a lie. The idea that, that they could exploit anybody, and even their condescending view toward the Arab that they were doing business with, Allah Ta'ala calls this a lie. This is a lie. This has nothing to do with a commitment to God. And I think that some of our, proprietors, entrepreneurs, they operate with that same kind of disdain, and it's a lie. They operate with that same, to be in a community for years and to experience something like that, and then to call the police. It's like, it's disappointing on many, many levels. And I think that one of the difficulties for me speaking about what's taking place is that I'm speaking in two registers. See, I'm speaking as your brother in Islam, and I'm very proud of that affiliation that we share. But when I'm talking about accountability to the protesters, I'm speaking as their brother, as a Black man, and we also have traditions in the same way the Muslims have traditions. We also have traditions that have sustained us through oppression, through racism, through enslavement, through Jim Crow, through lynchings, we have traditions that have sustained us. And those traditions have produced, in my estimation, much better personal results than smashing out windows and things of that nature. But so I'm speaking. This is something that, and this is, we have to recognize certain boundaries. And this is probably to the last question or the last observation that Omar raised. That might be something that I can say as a Black person watching my own neighborhood go up in flames. A neighborhood that I wanted to, play a part in developing and growing, both with my time and my money. I think I've earned the right to say to my community that I just expected more in terms of the way we expressed our frustration than to destroy our own community, to burn down our own house. And again, I say that fully acknowledging that I've been able to, by a stroke of luck, I've been able to develop different kinds of capital that have allowed me to invest in the neighborhood, that I'm a homeowner, that I was considering commercial properties, etc. Someone else that doesn't feel that. And I mean, that we have to start there. We have to start there with, what does that mean? And I'm willing to confront that as well. But I appreciate your observation, and I'm similarly embarrassed as a Muslim. I'm similarly embarrassed as a Muslim with, regarding how, blackness and anti-blackness has been handled in our community. And I have many personal stories about indignities that I personally have suffered at the hands of Muslims. So, no, sister, believe me, we're definitely on the same wavelength. We're definitely on the same wavelength. Somebody was offering some, I think.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, yes.
Just had maybe I'm just thinking out loud. So I understand, the outrage, and I understand the need to obviously, express anger at what's been going on for so long. But I guess what I'm having a hard time with, and maybe you can help me make sense of this, is I see a lot of people on social media and everywhere, and everyone that I know basically, encouraging not just the protests, but even like the looting and the burning of whatever's all that's going on. And I'm not here to criticize how people should express their anger, but I guess for me as a Muslim, I just have a hard time when people, I think really privileged people, encouraging sort of this sort of protest, because I do believe that a lot of vulnerable people are getting hit the hardest, especially small businesses. And I understand, when people are saying that life is more important, and this has been going on for so long, but maybe for me, I guess, coming from I think that inflicting, I wouldn't say, I guess it is some sort of oppression, destroying completely people's businesses. And I'm not saying it's just Black people. I understand it's a lot of people in general. And again, I'm just thinking out loud. I just have a hard time accepting that. And
No,
I think
it is.
I think all of us are home, we're safe, and our businesses are fine or whatever. But I think if it hit home, I think we would have a different, I guess again, you can help me make sense of this.
No, I think, I think what you're detecting is a certain kind of disingenuousness that it's almost like, wait, hold on. If you really believe that, the situation as it exists now is so unjust that it warrants, the criminal destruction of property, right? The situation is so unjust, then how dare you even have accumulated the personal property that you have? If you really believe that the situation is so unjust that it warrants, like you say, the destruction of people's livelihoods, then how dare you, from, like you say, a position of safety, a position of privilege, a position where a lot of your individual and personal interests are not being impacted by what's taking place, deem this in some way justified. I get that, and there's a part of me that feels that too. A part of me feels like, it's very easy to see this as something justified when the rate to which you will be impacted by it is minimal. It's very easy to say, this is all justified when, even if my local convenience store is also damaged, I have a car and I can go to one that isn't. You know what I'm saying? And really having no answers for people that feel like, well, what about, I'll be really, really honest. I mean, I called my mother just to check with her. And right here on 47th and Cottage Grove, that Walmart neighborhood market was forcibly entered, and it's been closed down. They're not able to operate. And my mother, who's still a lively woman, but is getting up in age, she just said to me, son, that's where I go. Because my mother lives on 47 in Lake Park. She said, son, that's where I go to get my groceries. And my mother doesn't own a car. And she said, man, I just don't know. I need some things from the store. I just don't know where I'm going to go. Right. And I said, Mom, I'll pick you up and we'll go, wherever we have to get your, to get your things. Or, the fact that when I drove by that location, I saw that the community, elderly people, a lot of elderly people were volunteering. Now, Walmart is a multi-billion-dollar corporation, but you had members of the community out there sweeping up the glass. Members of the community out there attempting to, engage some kind of cleanup. So my point is, in the same way that I identify with the pain of the people that smashed the windows of the store, and I'm with them, I also identify with the pain of the people that had their livelihood connected to this neighborhood, man. I think like the idea that they're not in any way worthy of our sympathy or our empathy, that my mother is just a lady who was privileged enough to be able to go to Walmart. I find that kind of oversight and I think almost automatic brushing aside of what someone has lost of their livelihood. Yeah, it certainly doesn't. And then this fake, I'm just getting frustrated now, not with you, but just with what I've been hearing, juxtaposition of property versus life, that's ridiculous. Of course, life is more important than property. But for me to also feel that, people had their livelihoods destroyed, that's unfortunate. Does not make me a sellout. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's unfortunate, man. Mm-hmm. And not everyone. And then too, I think we have to be very careful of using just this polarizing language that, we have to be, man, it's like, if we're talking about society as though you have the 1% and all of this destruction, all of this havoc is just harming their interests, that's so fake. That's not real. You have small entrepreneurs that, rose from disadvantaged backgrounds and scraped together everything they had to put this, to buy this storefront. Mm-hmm. This is my whole retirement was in that. Mm-hmm. Right? It's not this idea that, the wealthy and the privileged. It's not, man, there's a vast spectrum of what it means to be invested, in the surrounding community, in the infrastructure that's being destroyed. There's a vast spectrum. So like I'll tell anybody, bro, and I'm still coming to terms with this, because when the LA riots took place in '92, I was 10. And I was a young kid just watching the issue of police misconduct raised within the public domain and being really into the issue of police misconduct. And I was telling a friend of mine earlier today that this does look different as a father, as somebody with children, as a homeowner, and someone with commercial interests in the neighborhood. This does look different to me. And I think trying to come to terms with what that means for me has been difficult. You know what I'm saying? It does mm-hmm. look different to me. It does, from where I'm sitting now, it does look different. And I don't think that we should be forced into a life versus property fake conversation, straw man conversation, nor should the natural aversion that we have to anarchy be brushed aside, to chaos. I don't think that should be brushed aside. I think that to use this as an opportunity to recognize that that same system that we were invested in and to some extent felt was worthy of investment and by extension worthy of preservation, you had lots of Americans that did not feel that way about it. And that's I can confront that. See, I can confront that. Like I can actually confront that, man, the status quo that I felt invested enough in to buy property, to attempt to start businesses, to, so obviously with all of the injustice that status quo contained, I felt enough of an investment in it that I would still attempt to build my livelihood within it. That some people were so outside of its privileges that they don't feel any loyalty, any fealty toward it. I gotta live with that. Gotta live with that. Yeah, gotta live with that. Gotta live with that. It's tough. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, it's tough. But I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. No.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Thanks for putting this together. I had a question around your point about developing, and also just as as I am a Black person, I don't have a lot of the experiences that some of our brothers and sisters do, but I am trying to learn more. And one of those things that I'm trying to figure out is finding inspirations as folks put an eye towards rebuilding, finding inspiration and things to celebrate in the past. And some of the resources that I've come across so far are, Sapella Square, Black Past, but I also, I'm sure there's more, and I'm curious if if there are lists or readings that you would recommend as well.
Yeah, I think you started in good places. Sapelo Square, readings about. There's a one thing that I do appreciate about English is that we have a vast literature on every aspect. Race is kind of America's. Racism is America's original sin. It's America's cardinal sin. And, it's one that in spite of great social change, in spite of an American Civil War, in spite of a civil rights movement, in spite of the election of a Black head of state, this is just a sin that America has been, incapable of purging itself of cleansing itself of rectifying, its own, condition for many, many generations. Since this country's inception. But in the meanwhile, a very voluminous library has been produced on almost every aspect of race, within, I guess, the confines of the United States. So in terms of particular readings, we can connect, and we can, because Ismail, you have my number. You have my number. Oh goodness. You have my number. Let's get on a call, because there's so many books that. Excuse me 1 second, guys. You have to be quiet. You have to be quiet. I'm almost finished, inshallah.
Dad, let me do this in my room.
Yes, please.
We're doing this making in our room.
Yeah, there's literally thousands of books, right, that we can discuss. So you'd have to narrow down for me, like, what you're really interested in learning about, in terms of this, in terms of the Black experience or the Black Muslim experience. And I'm sure for each thing that you're thinking about, we probably could brainstorm 10 good titles. So just call me, inshallah.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you very much.
Alhamdulillah. Right. other things. Well, inshallah, I guess my wife has sounded the alarm that it's time for me to give my kids baths and to lay them down. Just, my message to this group, man, I think that, we love each other and we can't forget that. And in spite of everything going on out there, we have to continue cultivating, that spirit of love that animates, how we engage, inshallah, and just trying to identify with people from wherever they are, on the spectrum. People that are experiencing the loss of their livelihood, or people that are rebelling against the loss of their lives. Being able to understand all of that and to hold all of it is what I think our contribution to this conversation could be, inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر آمين يا رب العالمين. Ya Rabb, Ya Allah, Ya most merciful of those who show mercy, we ask you for healing, in this moment, for ourselves, for our family, for our communities, for our city, for our neighbors, for the world. Ameen ya Rabb al-Alamin. So I'll talk to you guys next week, inshallah.